permission to speak. Shadows hide you. I am listening. Our paths converge.
So good to see you.
Hail to you! Never lose hope.
Hear Fred shout.
I hear you. It has only begun. Fight on, Fred!
Welcome to episode 474 of Concede, a Hearthstone podcast dedicated to making the competitive side of the game more accessible to you. It is Friday, November 22nd, 2024 in the evening. Coming to you from Nomagana, Ohio, it's me, Edelweiss. From Northern Massachusetts, we have Wicked Good.
Hi.
From Teldrassil, California, we have Megasa.
Hello.
And from all around the world, we have you, dear listeners. This week's episode is brought to you by our producers, Number 3, Crash, Beef Squatch, David P., Walu, Jeremy T., Bottlecaps, Grumpy Monk, The Burger Club, Kirk Regan, Grizzly Bear, May, and SSJ5 Goku. And by our patrons of the week, Rob Ansel and Priya. You can go to patreon.com/CoinConcede to get perks like a thank you at the top of the show, early access to new episodes, one-on-one coaching sessions, and help support the show in the process. If you would like to support the show but cannot do so monetarily, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on your podcast feed of choice, as it always helps other people find the show. Quick note before we start things off. We're just not going to do a show next week with it being Thanksgiving and all. Years ago, we used to do like the Wednesday before, and it was fine, but complicated. But it's really just hard to make work, and I think we've sort of reached a space where we're sort of okay with saying, yeah, actually we can we can take a holiday break. Particularly because it's just tough for me to okay, we record Wednesday and then it needs to get edited before I drive to my grandmother's for Thanksgiving, or it waits until I get back from my grandmother's after Thanksgiving, and so we're just gonna take a break. I imagine devs and such will also be on break, so there's not really going to be any news anyway. It would just be meta stuff to talk about. So,
we should say for those of you outside of the U.S., it's Thanksgiving in the U.S. next week, which is the reason for said break. So
it's American Thanksgiving,
yes.
What is Canada's is later? I think it's later.
Earlier, I think.
Earlier.
Isn't it like, it's like in October sometime, I think.
Who can say?
Not sure. If you are Canadian, you can let us know.
The holiday where you eat food and try not to talk about divisive topics.
Yeah. And then you spend all your money the next day.
Fortunately, I don't have that issue. Yeah. Black Friday is really the big draw.
Yeah.
That's
My game store has had a table of just all the stuff that's going to be on sale for Black Friday, but isn't yet, just kind of taunting everyone for the past, I want to say month. And so he's opening early for members. So I think I have not left the house on Black Friday in literal years. And this might be the first time that I actually do.
See, I'm just going to take advantage of the online stuff, because even though there is a Cyber Monday, right? Like they still have online Black Friday sales. It's sort of a whole weekend at this point.
Oh, they've already started. I already have something coming tomorrow. I already ordered they had these scene boxes for like the Lord of the Rings Magic cards. So where they have like 6 cards that are in each one that make up like just one piece of art. So I ordered all 4 of them. It was like $50 off for the bundle. So that's coming tomorrow. So I've already started. Just like, it's amazing how we don't even wait for like the week before now. It's like, It used to be like Thanksgiving Day, and now it's just like, screw it. It's a week early. Let's just start putting everything on sale now. Like they're called Black Friday. Like if you go onto Amazon, they're called them Black Friday deals. It's not even like countdown to Black Friday or whatever. It's just like, no, here's Black Friday deals. Here you go. Like,
well, we already got on sale, I guess, for Black Friday. Like we didn't even pay attention. We're just like, it's 30% off. A nice reclining couch, which we're actually already using and loving to It's a little, it does like force me to sit on the couch sort of like a normal person, whereas my instinct is to sit on it any way other than a normal person. Although my body is just getting to the point where it's like, stop it. Please don't do that to us.
No, you can't leave that. Like, so what does that mean? Like,
I like lie on it sideways with, but like in a weird position with my elbows so that I can still type on the computer. Because I didn't have a tablet until recently, so it was always just laptops. Or like halfway off the couch practically, or like on the floor with the laptop on the couch. Like any way other than just like sitting like a normal person. But with the recliner, it does encourage sitting like a normal person, but you're still reclined. So it's like, okay, fine, maybe. Half the time I'll sit like a normal person. Instead of like perched with the computer on the top, which is where my cat likes to sit also.
Just get one of those laptop pads so you can like safely have your laptop actually on your lap.
Yes.
That's what my mom has been trying to convince me to do.
The MacBooks don't get hot anymore.
Me with my Helios.
I mean, the name is appropriate.
I have a big one for when I'm playing something that needs a mouse and keyboard on my lap while I'm on the couch. So yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I have to get that for it because I'm doing a couple things now that like need a mouse. Usually I'm a trackpad gal and the Macs have good enough trackpad that if you're used to it is fine. Like I play Hearthstone with the trackpad, no problem.
Yeah.
But some things, if there is a time component, really do want a mouse, but I don't want to have to go sit at a desk. What is this? Except for when I'm recording. So, or like at work, if I'm not at work, I don't want to sit at a desk. But this was long overdue to get this couch because my cat ruined the old one like several months ago, if not a year ago, by peeing on it while staring at us directly in the middle.
Oh no!
It's a fabric couch, and you couldn't pull the cushions out. And my husband's allergic to Nature's Miracle, and like there was just no way that it was gonna be saved.
Nature's Miracle.
Is that a cleaning product or cat? I'm confused.
I thought that was referring to the cat pee. I didn't think that was a cleaning product. Okay.
It is a cleaning product.
Oh, okay.
It does work. It's an enzyme-based cleaning product that like breaks down the cat pee. It works well, but it has its own smell, and my husband's allergic to it, so that doesn't work out very well.
I guess the cat pee is kind of the opposite of Nature's Miracle, like whatever that is. Like, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a miracle of getting rid of urea, but it just out of the cat, but now we all have to smell it. Yeah. So it's going to be this couch is kind of too big. We have to rearrange the entire living room a little bit. And now we're like, we want to get different end tables. We need a different coffee table. So that's going to be the big, instead of going somewhere over winter break, we're just going to be like doing the apartment, which to be fair, since he moved in here, I have still not like redone the art on the walls. And that was like 2 years ago.
Well, you haven't had a BlizzCon to buy more prints. So, that's fair.
Rachel and I moved back to Cleveland from Philly like 3 years ago, and we have art we still haven't put up yet. Just like,
we've actually been pretty good about that. Maureen got a portrait of a cat drinking wine while riding a shark and insisted on putting that in the guest bathroom.
Sure.
Which, as one does, so that you're actually, when you're doing your business, you're actually like looking at the cat doing this amazing adventure. So that is, that's our house. That is what we do. This is why I married her. This is why I married her.
Yeah, I guess public service on the Black Friday stuff from earlier. I highly recommend, if you can afford to like go in hard this year, do so. Because the tariffs are going to make things more expensive. And I don't think it'll even be just here necessarily, because if people import, or if countries import things from the States, right? And they're usually retaliatory tariffs, things going to cost more. But anyway, Hearthstone stuff. I think we've all been playing pretty different things this time around. Am I the only one playing any kind of starships? Probably.
Yeah.
So far.
I'm more stealing and poofing starships. So yeah.
How
I've not had a
rude.
lot of time to play. Hat sent me a Shopper Starship Demon Hunter, which I need to try, as well as I want to try Hunter, but so far I haven't had a chance.
Yeah.
So I'll have to defer to CDC on how to build the Hunter. That didn't go great for me. I bounced around trying various things. Couldn't really get them to work, Librams included. But tell you what, this Frost Starship deck I made, that probably is not even optimal, feels really good. Just because having access to the Refresh 2 Mana Crystals spell makes it so much easier to do things with Buccaneer and your Death Rattle starships. So you can get those turns where you get a reborn of the 3-cost that Death Rattles to summon another minion, or of the Arcanite Crystal, right? Just getting reborn on your starships so that you can very quickly ramp that power up to 10. Like, it's a counting game. If you can be on the fast plan starship-wise, you basically want to get up to 10 power with the thing that summons minions, and ideally a Guiding Light, the Spellburst deal, by turn 7. So that you can activate the starship and cast Corpsicle, right? Corpsicle is great because it means, as long as you're careful, you always have a spell to trigger Spellburst. So, you've got that reach in the end. I'm still not certain about actually the damage location, the cannons. But the reborn location is fantastic in this one, because it's just like, oh, you didn't clear my starship piece, let me give it reborn. Or you launch the starship and then give it reborn, as long as it's like pre-Yogg turns. There's just a lot of silly scenarios with giving the starships reborn. I've actually found it often is better to give the spell burst one the reborn, because if the spell burst,
then you get more spell bursts. Yeah,
exactly, which will trigger both, like, all the death rattles on it, right? So, like, yeah, you can get multiple death rattles of the summon a minion with of cost equal to this minion's power, but if you have 2 of the spell bursts, it'll do that anyway, and it'll also do multiples of the gaining armor. So I don't have like data on all the games I've played with it, because some were on one computer, some were on the other, some I had the tracker on, some I didn't. On this computer, I'm 6-1. I think when I was playing it on the laptop, I went like 10-1. It has been going very well for me, at least at the ranks I am. It's sort of like sometimes you get got by a Sonya rogue, sometimes you get got by Dungar, but otherwise, I've had games where I just sort of turbo to that 10 power, launch the starship, activate the spell burst, and there's this huge board that is also sticky. been a lot of fun.
Well, I've been playing the nemesis to that, apparently. But before the patch, I ended up picking up Egg Hunter. I didn't play very much of it because I was at this leadership training course for the last 3 days, which is the reason we're recording on Friday and not on Thursday. So I didn't have a whole lot of time to play, and when I did, I had no mental energy left, so I was not playing at a particularly high level. But I played 8 games with the Egg Hunter, and I had a 75% win rate, so that was going for me, I guess. But I guess Hunter's just so easy that even I can pilot it when I'm out of energy. Hi, CDC. Anyway. That's not true, but don't tell CDC that. Anyway, but after the patch, I just decided, well, Wheel Warlock didn't get touched, and Yeah, that was. I don't think it's. I don't. By the time you're listening to this, I don't think it's playable. I think it's definitely been getting harder out there on these streets for the Wheel Warlock. But day one, when everybody was trying to play Starships, boy howdy was that good, because you have Reverb, you have Sargeras, you have Ceaseless Expanse, and if they gain 1,000,000 armor, you don't care because you have a wheel, and they have to kill you, you don't have to kill them. So wheel and kill Jaden is, like peanut butter and chocolate. And you have a lot of removal in that deck. You're running table flip, you're running domino effect, you're running defile, you have health drink that gives you 3 of those, and then you also just like the only minions you're not even really running minions, because you're just running like kill Jaden and then the Loken and then the big things. You have Fanatum because of course you do, because you're playing wheel.
Mm-hmm.
And you have Loken, so you have 2 shots at getting a 15/15, which you almost always do unless you've already drawn them by turn 6. And then you got the Dark Alley Pact endgame Forge of Will's fun, which is some people don't particularly enjoy. There was one very funny game that I had against a rogue. So the Starship Rogues were out in full force yesterday when I was playing this deck, and I was happy to see them because that meant that I could ruin their days, and nothing makes my day happier other than getting to dust almost a full page of rogue cards when the bounce patches hit than getting to ruin a rogue's day. And this one had played, so they have the legendary that summons a copy of the starship. So they had 2 like 16/24 starships on board. And I played Sargeras. I emoted first, of course. And then I played Sargeras. And they conceded before waiting for Sargeras to resolve, because one of the pieces in their starship was the hunter one that attacks a minion as soon as it hits the board. So had they waited 5 seconds longer to go bottom right, they would have seen one of their starships kill Sargeras and their starships living to tell the tale. But they just conceded immediately. And then I went on my day like, okay, well, I got that one. I'm going to put that one in the win column because, sometimes wait for the card to hit the board. That's all I'm saying. Like, sometimes it's appropriate to concede. Wait for your stuff to actually get cleared before you concede. That's my message to you. What about you, Magesa?
Well, pre-patch I was playing Asteroid Shaman, the sort of aggressive list from World 8 that ended up in the VS report last week. And I also did a coaching on that. That was quite fun. And it felt like my combination of like proactive, but then it was fun to have this like burn game plan and think about like, do I pivot to Incendious or not? Balancing the asteroids and the eruptions. What do I do if they're a slower deck versus a faster deck? That definitely got hit with Malted Magma, as we'll talk about. So I was playing it a bit yesterday as well, because I was just like, I didn't have the energy to find a new deck and didn't do as well. Got pretty tilted by a armor druid.
Yep.
That just got dozens of armor at least over the course of the game. And I probably could have done a little bit more damage, I think, if I'd been a little bit more patient, but not a lot more damage. And then of course they were out of cards, but they played Kill Jaden, so it didn't matter. So
I wonder if we're gonna see some of that tradable silence dude starting to enter the meta if this armor druid like really becomes prevalent. Because and I'm glad this is true, even though it did surprise me at first. If you silence a starship piece, it loses the starship ability. So when it dies...
Oh, it does?
When it dies, it does not go into its little puck on the board. So, and some folks might be surprised by this as well if you're playing against them and silence it. But if you silence both pieces, then they just... That's it. The armor's gone.
Yeah. What would be really nice would be Shard of the Naru.
I don't want to hear about it.
The one thing that would happen, although this would definitely slow them down a lot, is that it still died. You could still get it back with Hydration Station, but you wouldn't be getting that slows them down way because what they want to be getting back with Hydration Station is the full starship, not pieces as much as possible.
It should slow them down enough if you are like any kind of proactive strategy, I think, just because you're now forcing them to resurrect in order to even get that second piece.
Yeah, right. That's not what they want to spend their hydration station on. I mean, I guess they'll get a they'll get a Ziliax back with it, but they really want to get more armor out of that if they can.
Right. They want to be getting their 12 armor every time, and then they like cubicle it, and so then they can get more. And
they're running cubicle now.
I have not seen
this one
on
was.
That deck. That's unusual. I've never seen a cubicle in those decks. Lately, I've been seeing them with just using that in Dungar Druid.
Yeah.
But then also, the Kill Jaden, like, just heavy armor fatigue strategy.
Yeah, this had all of it. I would say the cubicle, I probably would have gotten there without it. It did work out for them. I don't know whether it would work out in other matchups, but it did work out for them. And although apparently what I should be playing with Asteroid Shaman, I don't necessarily know if this is true, but Panacea said that they saw in our Discord said that they saw a infinite snapshot Asteroid Shaman. The idea is that you take a snapshot with a triangulate in your hand, and then you triangulate the snapshot. And because the asteroids only appear as one of the choices, no matter how many are in your deck, you can just do this as many times as necessary. And you want to make sure that you have triangulate and the ceaseless on the left side. And maybe something to shuffle in asteroids would be helpful. Yeah. So,
I mean, you are running Thrall's Gift in that deck, right? I mean, not the snapshot one, but like the one you were playing, because you can just hex the starship pieces.
The one that I was running was not running Thrall's Gift, but that might be a change to make post.
You gotta always you keep taking Thrall's Gift out of those decks. You got to keep that in there. That's the key.
It does get a lot of tokens, and so it is the kind of thing where like you'll be like, I miss lethal with Thrall's Gift so often because I'm not usually using it that way. So then I'll be like, oh right, this is also a bloodlust.
Not just for lightning storms and hexes.
So you do have to remember that if you're running that. Anyway, today, I had all these plans of things I wanted to do. I did put in Hat's Shopper DH that he had mentioned into the show notes. It's got Space Pirate, which is a 1-mana 2/1 pirate. Death Rattle, your next weapon costs 1 less. So that you get an unnerfed Umpire's Grasp, essentially. So that you can get your Shopper. And everything costs 4 or less except for the Shopper. And you've got the Starship stuff. And you've got some pirate stuff, and you've got Sock Puppet Slither Spear, and basically you get them. It's a hat deck, So I do want to play that. I haven't yet. What I got distracted by was going on HS Guru and finding Automaton Priest. And I will say, I don't think the list that I was playing is properly updated because I think we are not running Funnel anymore. Like Dreamboat would just be better. Because than Funnel at this point in most situations. But basically, it was this particular list that I found was like, you're making big automatons, and then if that fails, you are doing like the acupuncture and hot coals pain priest thing to finish them off. Because you're running stuff that copies 1-cost things anyway, you're running Pet Parrot anyway. So they work out well together. And I did have one game against the Libram Paladin today where I had 4 11/11s on turn 5 because of double gravity lapse, which, as a reminder, I think I explained this last week, but gravity lapse basically doubles the bonus from the automaton priest. I mean, from the automaton because it makes its current stats white base stats and then it adds the buff again. So it basically doubles it. And then, yeah, that was kind of gross. I don't think that Paladin was very happy. Overall, Libram Paladin seems pretty powerful. So I put both the lists that I was running and a list that I found on HS Guru that now has enough to show up that I think might be a little better. But you can also just go on HS Guru and search for Automaton Priest. There'll be more data by the time you hear this than there is right now. So that's been my week, other than like totally redoing the apartment in the rain. Felt bad for the people who were bringing in the couch. Luckily, it hadn't started raining too badly quite yet. So yeah, that's my life and bladder.
And we have a little bit of news, and then we have 29 cards that changed yesterday. 29 in a row. That's 37. Anyway, 29 for sure, actually. Oh, 29 for sure. There we go. Okay. There we go. There's a show title. Anyway. But we have a little bit of news to talk about before we get there, so let's do that.
Gadgets and Gazette always gets the scoop.
All right, so we got the announcement of Battlegrounds Season 9, which is starting on December 3rd, which is, I believe, a Tuesday. Yeah, that's should be next Tuesday by the time you're hearing this. Battleground Season 9, there's not going to be any new mechanic. Well, there's not going to be any new mechanic in game. We'll get to the new mechanic in a second, but
no.
there's not going to be any new mechanic. It's really going to be I feel like one of the updates every year is just kind of a big minion refresh, and that's what this is going to be. So there's going to be, I think they said it was like 90 minions and tavern spells will be removed, replaced by 90 new returning minions and 11 all new spells. Trinkets will be leaving with that update. So it's just going to be kind of vanilla Battlegrounds with three new heroes. One is, we may have gotten the other two revealed. They revealed them over the course of the week, but the one that was revealed in the initial announcement is Farseer Nubundu, who's got the Galaxy's lens as his hero power, which gives you a copy of the last tavern spell you cast, and each turn your next hero power costs one less, so you can just copy tavern spells with him. They've been doing a lot of reveals throughout the week. If you are interested in what's coming in Battlegrounds, I would say go follow some of the Battlegrounds creators. They've been doing a lot of reveals over the past couple of days. We're not going to go that deep into it because, again, we're not really qualified to discuss the intricacies of a Battlegrounds meta, and also there's a lot of changes that I don't know how one would make sense of it, though I'm sure if we were Battlegrounds pros, we might be able to. Though they are changing the damage cap with this update. So only in solo Battlegrounds, not in duos. The Battlegrounds, so right now the damage cap is 15 damage. So you can take at most 15 damage in one shot. The change is that it's going to start at 5 damage. So you can only take 5 damage at once. On turn 4, it will go up to 10 damage. And then on turn 8, it will go up to 15 damage and will be removed entirely once you're down to the top 4. This is something that other auto battlers typically do. They'll typically, I don't know if they hard cap the damage like this, but they typically have the damage ramp up a little bit more gradually over the course of the game. And such that, like, you're never really getting eliminated too early. Like, I can't remember the last time that I got eliminated in TFT before, like, stage 3 was over, or certainly maybe even stage 4, which is, like, probably like 25 minutes in. So I think this is going to be a good change for Battlegrounds, but this is going to be a bit of an adjustment. But I mean, really, it's going to be between turns 4 and 8 that you're really going to feel it. I don't think anybody's really hitting anybody that hard on turns 1, 2, and 3 for the most part. I mean, I guess you can always high roll, or maybe the pros are. I don't know. Maybe they're just smacking each other for 15 on 3, and I haven't learned how to be that good at the game. But you really should feel it in like turns like 4 through 8, where you're only doing 10 damage, and then after that, it's just going to be normal damage cap as far as we're concerned. So. The other change means that we probably need to play this.
Time is money, friend!
So they've introduced a new consumable into Battlegrounds. called tokens. So what these are they will allow you to reroll your hero on the selection screen. So you get either 2 or 4 heroes, depending on whether you've paid for the tavern pass or the Battlegrounds pass or not. And you'll be able to use one of these tokens in order to get a new choice. So if you get 4 heroes and you don't like any of them, then you can reroll 1 or 2 or 3 or all 4. The reroll is per hero, not per set. So each one of the heroes will have a button underneath it that says reroll. If you play TFT, this is like rerolling augments. It looks very similar. Except that each one of those rerolls will cost you a token. Well, how do you get tokens, you might ask? Well, you'll get some of them on the rewards track. Some of them will be free. Some of them will be with the season pass. And then you'll be able to buy 4 for $1 in the in-game shop. There will also be some that will be given out through drops, through Twitch, and there will be some gifts, a free intro gift of 2 tokens that'll be added to all accounts, and then another 4 free tokens that'll be able to be claimed for the shop. So you'll be able to get some of these for free, but there is understandably a little bit of a concern of being able to pay to improve your choices, because there is generally a fairly significant gap between the best heroes and the worst heroes. And if you don't want to be saddled with one of the worst ones, then you might need to use one or more of these in order to try to improve your chances. And that is potentially, it could be seen as problematic, though we obviously haven't played with them yet to know how much of an impact these are really going to make.
I think regardless of how big the effect actually is, it is a competitive advantage.
Yes.
And it is a thing you can get with money. And it never feels good when there is a competitive advantage earned through spending money. Now, unfortunately, it seems like that's the only way they can make money off of Battlegrounds, at least,
right,
according to them. That they tried full cosmetics and they had to do the rewards track, which did this the first time, right? Where you can pay to see 4 heroes instead of 2, right? That was the first instance. And now with you can pay for more rerolls. And it seems like just cosmetics are I don't know if not supporting the mode is what I would say, but not providing satisfactory income, whatever that is considered.
You have to show growth
right.
of revenue in this kind of company, which I'm not saying that means that they should be doing stuff like this. I'm just saying that's probably part of what their thought process is.
Well, they need to justify the costs of continuing to support the mode, right? I don't know that they necessarily need to show growth, but they need to at least be, providing some return on investment for the cost that, it costs money to develop, to continually support a mode like this and come up with a new set every 3 months. So
yeah,
that needs to have some return. And beyond, I'm sure that the tavern pass is or the season pass is probably bringing in some money, but that's a one-time purchase, and they don't really have any. They have the cosmetics, but those aren't really recurring purchases like something like this might be. So like constructed as packs, right? People will go in and they'll buy packs, or they'll buy some of these bundles to get some of the cards, and that's a way to provide, repeatable revenue. There's nothing like that in Battlegrounds, because once you pay for the tavern pass, unless there's a cosmetic that you really want, and even the cosmetics for the most part you don't get to use them every game, right? Like you get to only when you get to play that hero. It's not like a hero portrait in Hearthstone, where if you are going to spend $25 on a Ragnaros hero portrait, you can just go jam Shaman or Warrior, and you will get to play with that every single game. If you're paying for a Battlegrounds portrait, you only get to use that once every 10, 20, 30 games to whenever you're offered that hero. I guess now if you can reroll for that hero that you bought the portrait for, now you can get more use out of it. Maybe that helps. I don't know. But
I mean, that is one thing that they call out specifically. I do think that this is an issue that it can be hard to, especially if you're kind of a casual player, it's hard to just sort of focus on one thing. Like if you're new to standard Hearthstone, you can just like pick a deck and jam it. But if you're new to Battlegrounds, you can be like, I'm going to learn elementals or whatever it is, but then you don't get offered elementals, or you're like, I want to learn like these few heroes, but you don't get offered those heroes. You have to be really broad. I can see how this feels worse than the season pass offering more, because at least the season pass was like, you pay it once per season and then you're done. Whereas this is very kind of microtransaction and you're having to think about it every single time. Is this bad enough that I want to re-roll it? What's my budget for re-rolls? Versus like even in standard Hearthstone, obviously a lot more expensive to have a collection in Hearthstone than it is to have a season pass in Battlegrounds, but I can expect to spend kind of a certain amount. As a non-free-to-play player, I pay kind of a certain amount per expansion, and then I basically have whatever I want to play with, and then I don't think that much more about it unless I think that this hero portrait is really cool.
Yeah. Wicked, to your point on the cosmetic issue, like I think of League of Legends, which is famously supported by cosmetics, right? But you're playing a 30 to 45 minute game with a character that you choose, right? You can have your rotation of like, oh, I play this like 5 to 10 different characters in most of my games, and so I will get specifically cosmetics for those ones. BGs, there are bundles of things, all these different themes that may have a bunch that you don't pick often or that often aren't good, and you can get these individual ones, but they're like very microtransaction-y, right? You have to engage with the runestone system that people don't really love. So it's just a trickier needle to thread. And as much as people hem and haw over these things, they work.
And I guess Teamfight Tactics is probably the even better example, right? Because it's also an auto battler, and they don't have any cosmetics on the units. Like the units are all themed for whatever the set is. It's the board, which Battlegrounds has the equivalent of a strike, right? Where when you win a match, then what the animation that goes off, and then but it's the little legend, which is your small little guy that's running around collecting all the things that are falling on the board. That's what you're putting the cosmetics on, not the units. And that just stays on the board for as long as you want it to. Like I've had the same like chibi KDA Akali for like 6 months.
I hope whoever came up with that idea is doing very well for themselves, because they really nailed it.
Yeah, and it was from day one, right? Like that was in there from like TFT, like set 1 had that in there, and it was very smart. So, Battlegrounds didn't have any cosmetics to start with, and they layered those in after. But they gotta find a way to make that work, and there's a lot. If you read this announcement, there's a fairly involved FAQ that's going through a lot, trying to get ahead of a lot of these things. And I think they do a good job of saying, like, we don't want the games to be samey, so we don't want you to re-roll all of the heroes at once. We don't want it to be an outsized impact if you have 4 heroes versus 2 heroes. I believe if you get to the end of the season pass, you will start earning some tokens the way that you earn 50 gold for a level on the constructed pass. So there are ways to do that if you're playing a lot. I think that they're really trying to do this in a way that is respectful of, and not trying to be a cash grab, right? Like I think they really are doing the best they can, but they also are they're not doing this. They're not making the game out of the goodness of their hearts. They need to make money off of it too.
I think I would describe it as like they have a mandate from the money people, right? And this is going to work. So I think the designers, the people that we interface with and love and everything, right, are doing their best to kind of ease that that feeling, right, that negative emotion tied with an announcement like this, and make it still be a net positive for everyone, because it does legitimately suck when you're like, you look at the 4 and you're like, well, maybe we just go next game. And I know people who do that, actually, who full casual are just like, they see the 4 characters and they're like, nope, next.
Yeah. And this is why there's always one dead player at the beginning of every game too. So maybe if it reduces that a little bit, maybe that ends up being a positive experience, all things considered.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that when you play at low MMRs, there are always dead players, and I didn't quite realize why. That absolutely makes sense as to why there are dead players. And I mean, it's still not quite like Hearthstone Standard, where you have to like build up the collection. You have all the heroes, you just don't necessarily get to pick them, for better and for worse. I think I kind of like how Standard works, but also it's less it's both more and less accessible for new players. Anyway, as I say, if this is really bothering you, I think that is valid, because it is adding more to the game that can feel like a competitive advantage. But I think of all the things they could do, I don't know that this is comforting. It could be worse.
And I guess the other part that I missed is that there is an additional level of the season pass called the Season Pass Plus. This feels like going to Disneyland, with all the different levels. But Season Pass Plus will give you one reroll per game that will not consume a token. So you can kind of pay upfront for not unlimited rerolls, but you're not having to constantly, you're kind of paying upfront for a bunch of rerolls, because you're going to be able to use one a game and then be able to take whatever the worst one is in every game, swap it out, see if you get something better. So if we don't know how much that's going to cost, maybe we do.
We actually do. It's
do we?
So the regular season pass is $15 USD or 1,500 runestone. The season pass plus is $20 USD or 2,000 runestones. Or if you get the first one and you change your mind, you can upgrade later for $5 USD. Or 500.
So it's $5 more if you think that you're going to buy 20 rerolls over the course of a 4-month season, like $5 is not that much. And you can always just decide, hey, I'm rerolling a lot. Maybe you use up all the free ones. See if you are going to, if you feel like you're going to use them more, and then just pay the $5 on top of it. Right. So there are, it's also should be noted that there are going to be rerolls on the season pass. There are also going to be some StarCraft cosmetics toward the back half of the season pass that are not going to be available until February. So they'll unlock at some certain point when we get a certain patch. Like there's a StarCraft Queen Ajara, a StarCraft Cho and Gal. I mean, I imagine that Queen Ajara is probably going to be some sort of a Zerg type thing. Like that just kind of goes without saying. But there's a StarCraft Zergal Rush, which is got to be some sort of a Murloc that looks like a Zerg. I can't wait to see what that's going to look like. So those sound like they're going to be cool, but they're all at the back half of the season pass. If you're like me, you probably won't even get it close to them. But this is going through, I think this has more levels than it used to, because I think they usually went through like 30 levels, and this goes to 48. So there is going to be more there for your money too. But if you would rather spend your money on something you can eat, and you happen to be in London, Shake Shack is doing a World of Warcraft 20th anniversary collab. I was actually very upset because there was a Shake Shack that I went into that was like next to my hotel where I was staying for this training thing. And then I saw this being posted in the Discord. I'm like, what? How did I miss this? Because I don't know that I probably would have gotten the Warcraft Shake, but it's apparently only in London for some reason, and not a chain wide thing. But this is only, well, it happened already, so it's already over. So you missed it, I guess. But hopefully, we're telling you in case they decide to bring it to the US, which hopefully they will. But there was a Horde burger inspired by the taverns of the capital of Orgrimmar, a burger to satisfy the appetite of an orc. Double cheeseburger with Alterac Swiss cheese topped with crispy dark tusk boar slices, which I assume is bacon. Bloodberry pickled onions, spicy horde sauce, and crystallized spices. There are Alliance fries, inspired by the Elwyn Forest in the Kingdom of Stormwind and the home of the Alliance. They're crinkle-cut fries topped with Golden Alliance cheese sauce, crispy bacon, Elwyn Forest fried greens, and sumac blasting powder. And there's a Xalatath shake, which is taking inspirations from the dark powers of the void. The Xalatath shake is made of ubi frozen custard, blended with black sesame, with dark void glaze and shadow orbs, which is pearl sugar, topped with whipped cream, more shadow orbs, and void dust, which is charcoal dust, apparently, which I guess is something you can eat. I am not a foodie, so I am a simple man with simple tastes. But so that's what that unfortunately you can't get that anymore, but hopefully they'll bring that to the US so you can get that at a Shake Shack near you. I would imagine that's something that if it was successful, they may expand that further. But it's an interesting colored foods. So. And I'm sure that your stomach would not at all have an Orc versus Alliance battle in it by the time that you were done eating. Anyway, if you want to spend your money more on stuff in Hearthstone, there are some new bundles that have been added. We got the signature spell bundles for Nebula, Black Hole, and Dwarf Planet for Shaman, Rogue, and Warrior, respectively. They are very pretty. Oh no, Warlock. Sorry, not Rogue. Black Hole is the Warlock spell. So Nebula is probably the only one of these that has seen any sort of meta play, but you never know.
Has it? It did in Theory Crafting, but I have not seen it since.
I saw a couple of Nebula Shamans on ladder. Okay. Yeah,
it is
unfortunately
gorgeous.
Yeah, I mean, they're all gorgeous.
They're all gorgeous. Even the Dwarf Planet one is gorgeous. It's just also Dwarf Planet.
He's got fire coming out of his nose. So, those are all 2,000 runestones or $20 USD. They come with 5 class packs as well, and there are also we got additional Starship piece bundles for Rogue, Druid, and Warlock. The Rogue and Druid ones both include a legendary in addition to the 2 each of the other pieces. So those are 6,000 runestones or $60 USD. The Warlock does not have a Starship legendary. So that is 3,500 runestones or $35 USD. And again, those all come with 5 class packs. And those do not include the neutral Starship pieces, which are in a separate bundle once again.
Yeah, I did break down and get the neutrals, but I think that's my limit. Because, you get, you're going to be running the Arcanite Defense Crystal in anything anyway.
Yeah.
And just having that gives you the signature of the big piece. So, yeah. Sure.
Yeah. So anyway, if you have that money to spend and you want to bling out your Starships, you can do that. There is also, if you missed the Celeste Mage portrait, that's the Space Dragon. You can go ahead and get that for I believe that's $7 USD or 1,000 gold in the store as well. So that's a pretty good one. It's got a very good hero power animation. So if you are a fan, that's a good one to pick up. And yeah, that's gonna do it for news. Oh wait. We've got a ginormous patch to talk about, so let's do that.
All right, so we had patch 31.0.3, our first big balanced patch of the Great Dark Beyond, on Thursday, which is yesterday as we record this, November 21st. There were, as Wicked mentioned, 29 changes, both nerfs and buffs. We have a long dev comment, but I think we would start by just kind of talking about that a bit. Then we'll talk about the changes, and we might come back to kind of general thoughts as we're talking about specific changes. But the devs say the goal of this patch is to focus on the Great Dark Beyond. The power level of new decks and archetypes is lower than we intended it to be, and older archetypes are more dominant than we'd like. To make new decks and cards stand out more, we're weakening a number of cards, mostly from older sets, and strengthening others, all from the Great Dark Beyond. Our long-term ambition is for the overall power level of the game to be closer to the Great Dark Beyond than the power level of sets before it, but we think some buffs are warranted and needed to hit our immediate goal, encouraging exploration in the Great Dark Beyond. Between balancing our immediate and long-term goals, plus the sheer number of changes in this patch, we expect there will be some level of follow-up adjustments we plan to work on in the next balanced patch window after we see how these changes affect the meta coming before winter break. So that would probably be sometime in December before they break. In deciding which cards to bring down in power, we looked at 3 major categories. 1, overly powerful cards and archetypes from older expansions. 2, cards that led to frustrating experiences, even if not overly powerful. Cough, Quasar. And 3, cards that were overly hostile to new expansion cards and mechanics like starships. So that's a long sense of their balanced philosophy. I think it was fairly uncontroversial that most of the archetypes that we were playing with for Great Dark Beyond and Theory Crafting, that we were playing with in the pre-release brawl, a few of them landed, but most of them didn't. And so that was really the goal of this set, especially, starships being the sort of marquee mechanic. I think somewhat more controversial here is the statement, our long-term ambition is for the overall power level of the game to be closer to the Great Dark Beyond than the power level of the sets before it. That's not necessarily something I agree with.
I mean, it depends on what you define by power, right? I think that there's not a lot of room to grow in a rotating format from where we were. And I think that you really can do only one or two things. You can either bring the overall power level down to let the new stuff shine, or you can power creep, right? And then power creep has its own set of problems, because then everything becomes an arms race, and you can't really do anything that's not broken. And then you have to keep one-upping yourself in every subsequent release, right? So there are definitely some people who enjoy that. I mean, Wild is that format, right? I mean, but then what happens with Wild is that you get you kind of know going in that you're going to have maybe a handful of cards every expansion that are going to make an impact, because the overall power level is so high. You can't really do that when the new set is expected to shine in the rotating format, right? Because then you have to push everything so hard to push out everything that came before it. And at a certain point, that ends up leading to frustrating experiences for a lot of people. I mean, we were talking, I don't remember if we were talking on the podcast or off the podcast last week about the fact that there's so much from hand damage, but you kind of have to do that because of how much armor and healing there is in the meta now, that you can't just rely on chipping away at somebody because there's perfect twin Ziliacs that's going to heal you for 12, or you can just launch a starship and get 24 armor, right? So it's you can't really set up a 2-turn lethal anymore, because of how much that side of the game has been pushed. And then the other half of it, the how do you actually end a game piece, needs to go to keep up with that.
Yeah. I do wonder if Arcanite Defense Crystal has to go down to 4 armor in next patch, just because it is so powerful, particularly in the Druid, where you are frequently pulling out with Oaken Summons, which gains you 6 armor in the first place.
Oh god, yeah.
So it's this 6 armor for a 3/4 taunt that death rattles to gain you 6 armor, and then you can resummon in a moment of desperation the following turn for another 4 taunt and 6 armor.
Yeah, or you take taunt off of it, right? Because if you take taunt off of it, then it's A, it's slower, and B, it doesn't get resurrected from Hydration Station.
I mean, that feels very targeted and kind of ruins it for every other class.
Oh, except warrior. Or if warrior starts using it, then I guess they don't really have a starship, so they wouldn't. But yeah, they will. Yeah, in the StarCraft expansion, they will have a starship.
Or you just make hydration stations so your taunt minions have +1 attack. That's obviously a little bit of a meme, but I am worried about Armor Druid especially, but in general, if we're going to be, I mean, so we'll talk about specific changes, but a lot of things that were hit were direct damage. And
most
of the direct damage that we have got hit in some way. And if you're going to do that, then I think you really do need to do something about the armor arms race as well.
Yeah.
Because if the problem is that they pushed each other up a lot, and so then direct damage had to be doing, 30 damage a pop or more every time in order to be able to compete against the armor decks, and then the control decks felt, well, now we need to have more armor so that we don't just die to that, and then it becomes like, then we need to bring both of them down if we're bringing one down, in my opinion. So as well as that would, for you, Wicked, like Priest can't compete in an armor meta.
No. I mean, I'm even seeing that in like I'm playing the Warlock, which also does an armor, and it's dying from high life totals a lot. And I like, honestly, one of the things that I found that I really wasn't enjoying was the fact that like the decks that did end the game just required a lot of math that I really didn't feel like I do enough math. Like, not that there isn't math normally in the game, but it was like complicated math that you had to kind of do on the fly. And like, I do that for work. Like, I don't want to be doing like complicated arithmetic just to play a game on my off time. You know what I mean? Like, I not that you don't always have to calculate things, but like there was like a lot of little ways that you could just miss out on like chunks of damage, like 10, 15 damage if you weren't like doing the math right.
I mean, I think what you want is a balance of decks that do that and decks that don't.
Yeah.
Still have.
It just felt like they all
power.
had to do that. Yeah.
I think, in terms of power, I think what we used to kind of expect was you'd have a kind of lower power 4-set meta, and then yes, the 5th set has to be more powerful, and so it just is, and so the meta power goes up. And then the 6th set has to be more powerful, and so it just is, and then it goes up. And then you probably nerf those cards when you get to the 4-set meta. And so I don't think it necessarily, like, there's room for standard to grow, I think, without having to be wild, as well as that fantasy of the, there's a reason why people love to play games like Slay the Spire, for example. Now, obviously, you don't want everything to be solitaire decks. Slay the Spire is literally a solitaire game. But coming up with, I want to survive just on the razor edge, and then solve this lethal puzzle. There is some mutually exclusive tension between that and the I just want to undo everything my opponent does type of control player. But I think that the sort of more combo player tends to have their stuff nerfed faster, harder, pretty much every set, always. It's like, yes, that shouldn't happen on 5 for very long, probably. It's fun for some people. It's pretty egregious, but like, it must be a conscious decision to go more towards the, board-based gameplay. But I think we want to, if we're doing that, we want to still have some spikes, some ability for burn. People don't like proactive decks unless there's some burn. I mean, look, even when they're tier 1, people don't like proactive decks unless there's some burn. You don't necessarily need to have OTKs.
Yeah. Well, also because there's a lot of lifesteal taunts that keep you from being able to win on board, and like more than one now. And I think that's also something like I don't even know that they're nerfing combo as much as they just want to get away from last year's cards. And it feels like if they could rotate last year out ahead of this expansion, they might have, right? Just because like the power level on those cards, like we had, it feels like forever ago, the agency balance patch was this standard year. That was in the 4-set meta to bring down the power of last year's cards, and it still wasn't enough, right?
Well, and I want to note as well that the expected dynamic of 4-set has been very largely shifted by mini sets.
Yes.
Because now when you go into 4-set, it's not just those 4 sets, it's 4 sets and 3 mini sets. And then eventually you get another mini set. So, it's like 100 more cards. And
it's like a full set by the time you're done.
And each of them an instance of them trying to make an impact on a meta, right? Which means I think there's just been naturally some kind of additional power creep and heavy balance, as people have experienced, right? To put their thumb on the scale another way. It's just led to, a very strange dynamic. And they hit a lot of direct damage here. There is one deck that I'll get into later that is untouched. That is probably going to be the high ranks OTK deck now. It involves Sonya. Surprise, surprise.
Shocking.
Rogue always finds a way. As long as there's Sonya, Rogue always finds a way. At least.
Mean, it's Sonya and Ziliax are just here to just bully the meta no matter what happens. So, yeah. I
mean, I was pretty pessimistic yesterday running into Armor Druids, I will say, about speed of this meta. I am less pessimistic about it now, and that I'm seeing some more faster options. But I do think lower power level hopefully shouldn't mean just like really like slow games, right? Would just bring the numbers down.
And it hasn't felt that way, really. Like, it hasn't felt that slow. At least to me. I don't know. Maybe if you feel that, do you feel that it's felt slow since the patch?
No, because I've tried to play Libram Paladin and it has not gone great. Right? Yeah, I feel like that deck is having an issue of falling behind in the first few turns.
Yeah, I suppose, what you want more than just like power level lower or power level higher is like to have the power level synergistic and spread so that each like individual cards are powerful, but their real power is in their synergy, and so that you're not just like you have fewer things where like this deck hits the nuts and then it's just like absolutely skyrocketing, and then if it doesn't hit the nuts, it's just sitting there. Obviously, it's a card game. A little bit of that is always going to happen. It's part of being a card game, but you're trying to not just get either just piles where each card is kind of individual and they don't synergize, or things where like one card is so central to it and you can't necessarily tutor it, and it's just like, did we find it or not? I was like the only person who played Naga Priest as much as I did, possibly literally, because if you didn't draw Wig, it was miserable. And it did get less miserable over time. I think a lot of people didn't give it a second chance. As it got more cards, you were less sad if you didn't draw Wig. But like, if there had been a way to tutor Wig, even if you somehow toned down the rest of the deck, like that, like fine, or had some redundancy for it. I guess there was a way to tutor it with the 2-mana discover a spell in your deck, but that wasn't ideal.
Well, and it's interesting you mentioned that. I do think one of the reasons that some of these combo decks or very powerful synergy decks have been hitting repeatedly is they've been doing a lot more targeted card draw. And so Druid in particular, right? You can discover spell from your deck. Right now you can recruit the taunts out of your deck. Like, you recruit the Starship piece or the 1/5, which draws you a discounted Ziliax, right? Like, there are these chains of targeted card draw, which are cool. They're fun. I do think they're good for fun. Zarimi Priest, one of the best decks in the game right now, and you've got a spell that draws 2 dragons, right? I think these things are good for the game, but they also can lead to situations if there's too much of them, or you're able to specifically hit certain things where, you set up these crazy combos.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult, right? Because I think ideally you do want some consistency to a deck, and I think draw in general, like we see classes that really struggle for draw because it's very frustrating. But when you have Quasar Rogue and they just draw their entire deck all at once, then that's frustrating. Or if something is extremely powerful and it happens every single game, I think like burn decks that are the most interesting to me was like we had a burn shaman from a few years ago that kind of your entire deck was combo pieces and also staying alive pieces. And so you had to kind of like figure out which pieces do you stay alive and then how you were going to win the game. And we were talking in the Discord today about how it's much easier, I think, to design a deck that's fun to play than to design a deck that's fun to face. As well as to play. So
but that also existed in a meta that didn't have an overabundance of neutral armor gain and neutral lifesteal. And I think it's not that there's like a lot of armor gain and lifesteal, it's that it's neutral armor gain and neutral lifesteal, right? Like Ziliax can go in any deck. Arcanite Defense Crystal can go in any deck, right? And there's other ways to get a fair amount of armor. It's not even limited to just particular classes, and even the ones that do gain life, like it's a lot, and it's a lot all at once, right? Like you can have a couple of those effects and it's not a problem. It's when you have like a critical mass of those effects, then that tends to warp the meta in a way that you kind of have to have combo decks, because like you're not just like, you can't, like I haven't seen Pirate DH in a while because
I saw one today, but
you're not getting there with 30 damage. Or if you are, you need to go real faster than it's going now. Because as soon as you get an Arcanite Defense Crystal out, you got to get through the actual minion, and then you got to get through the 6 armor, and then they just get more, right? So it kind of warps it in a way that you have to have combo decks, but then you have to do something like this to get everything down. I do, and that's not all last year's cards either. Ziliax is this year. Defense Crystal is this year. Yogg obviously is last year. That's neutral removal, so that's something that's at least a little bit in the more review. And Marin seems to have taken a step back finally, but those are things that they're going to have to reckon with and do something about at a certain point, because I understand that they needed starships to hit, and that's fine for a little while, but every class having access to 12 armor and 12 lifesteal healing it's going to be a problem for another year if they don't do something about it.
Very frequently more than that, right?
Yeah.
Because it's the 2 pieces that are 6 each. It's the launched ship.
Right. That's another 12. Yeah.
A bunch of them aren't running Exodar, but if you are, then you can get the pieces again.
Yeah.
If you're Hunter or Death Knight, you have Yodeler. Death Knight also cannot run Yodeler and just use the spell burst to trigger,
or the location to give it reborn, or
anyone could run Cubicle if they want to.
Or Ravenous Kraken.
Yep. Yeah, in the Hunter you do a lot more. Yeah, either Kraken or Cubicle, I feel like. So there's a bunch of ways of just saying, oh, I'm against aggro. Well, then my plan is to get as much armor as possible.
Yeah, you are convincing me some on the power, because if you have that kind of defense for control decks, then the aggro decks need to be able to get under that to exist. So then you end up with what I will admit is kind of a crazy situation for some of the aggro priests right now, where you're just like, yeah, it's turn 1 and I've got like 2 3/4s with Divine Shield.
Yeah.
Your turn. Because if you don't have that kind of turn, you don't have at least some of the time.
Yeah.
But that's not every game, obviously. But if you don't have that kind of turn at least some of the time, then you don't win enough.
You have to do
that percent. Yeah.
And then the control deck, the slower decks need to run all those things, because if you don't, then you die, right? So now you're taking away some of the deck slots that are in the deck because you need to run those things. Like this is when they had their first like rotation out of it wasn't core back then, but out of Classic, when they sent like Sylvanas and Ragnaros and Azure Drake to Wild, it was because those cards were the best cards at those mana slots. And it was effectively like you were starting with 26 or 27 cards because you had to put those cards in. And we're kind of getting to that point. It's not every deck, obviously, like an aggressive deck doesn't want Arcanite Defense Crystal, but it's getting to the point where almost any slow deck needs it in order to be able to keep up. And then the aggro decks evolve, and then you end up in this just... Anyway, we should probably talk about what they actually did.
We should probably talk about the actual changes. Yeah, I mean, I think it is hard to figure out where do you start de-escalating, right? Because if you only do one side or the other, and then you can't hit all of the things at once. But anyway, we will talk about the attempt of starting the process of de-escalating. And of course, like, this is just the first balance patch that they are doing. It's much more involved than the first one usually is, but it's still, especially, and they did a lot of buffs, but maybe a little bit more cautious on the buffs than they might have done because it's the first patch. We'll get there. First, we have a ton of nerfs. Reno Lone Ranger went from empty the enemy board and limit it to one space to just remove all enemy minions from the game. So it does not poof starship pucks anymore. It does not poof locations. It does not poof dormant minions. It only removes enemy minions. It still poofs the minions, I believe. It doesn't trigger death rattles.
It doesn't trigger death rattles, but you have to get rid of the high noon effect if you want to leave dormant minions and starships and whatever behind, because otherwise you actually just board lock your opponent. So it actually would be stronger if they didn't get rid of the high noon effect and left the starship, because then you just wouldn't be able to play anything that turn. So
it would also just break the game if they had a starship and a portal.
Oh yeah. That
right,
too.
if they have more than one thing or a location. Their comment is, Reno has been a polarizing card since its release. I remember sitting in the audience at BlizzCon, seeing that card go up and being like, oh boy, we are going to be talking about this for a year and a half.
And we were.
Reno's a necessarily strong payoff to singleton decks, they say, which many players really enjoy, but playing against him can be really frustrating, especially his next turn board limitation. It's been difficult to balance those competing player interests, and we don't make this change lightly, but we felt Reno was due for an update to no longer hit non-minions, dormant minions, etc., so we could give starships a better chance to fly. I mean, my opinion is good, basically, on this one.
I mean,
I think this was the only way starships have a chance, right? Even though I do think people don't launch them early enough, often enough, like you can just do it earlier for tempo, the mechanic lends itself to building up a huge battle cruiser and then having this enormous minion in the late game and doing silly stuff with it. So if that just gets poofed mid-construction, it's not great. And it's felt bad for me the entire time. Like, I always thought it was weird that you put out Rheastraza at the same time as this thing that gets rid of Rheastraza, and that we had, like, one expansion of the Sargeras portal and then a Reno way of poofing it.
Yeah, so and a whole expansion around locations.
Yeah. So I certainly think it was time, right? Yes, it would be rotating out in a set, but if ever there was a set that you needed to make this change for, it was the Starship set. So I do think they could have reduced the cost back a bit, like maybe even back to 8. But I totally understand not wanting to like rile people up anymore and just being like, we'll leave it at 10.
It's over. It's been overplayed. It's been overplayed for a year.
Mm-hmm.
Like nothing. They've nerfed it 3 times now.
This is the 3rd.
Yeah, this is the 3rd time. Like nothing stopped people from playing it. This might finally. And you know what? It's been enough. I think that you really, it's been such a dominant card in the meta for so long that they had to do something drastic. And I don't mind them not reducing the cost back. Let them do that when they rotate it out to Wild. It's fine. Well,
the next change that they made, we have a couple changes to Mage. I'm just going to do like all of these Mage/Druid is Rogue, but really isn't Rogue changes together. So Lamplighter went from deal 1 damage for each turn you've played an elemental to deal 4 damage. Their comment there was elemental decks are designed to be tempo decks. It's deal 4 damage if you played an elemental on the last turn. So it no longer depends on whether you played, like how many previous elementals you played. It's not about the chain. It's just like lots of elemental cards. If you played an elemental last turn, deal 4 damage, can still go face, but it's only 4 damage. They say elemental decks are designed to be tempo decks that can play for board and be aggressive. We want them to have some finishing power, but Lamplighter gave the deck more direct damage than we'd like. We think this change, instead of just making it cost more or only hit minions, better aligns with the goals for the archetype. I am glad they didn't make it only hit minions. As you know, they mentioned that as in this as something they might have been considering. It's harsher than I would have done if it were me, but obviously I am not a designer. And I know that when my husband's been playing a lot of Elemental Mage, he saw this and was like, am I going to have to learn a new deck? Apparently Elemental Mage is still doing fine. A lot of the lists that I've seen today are adding Azerite Giants back to have a little bit more late game. Sure. There is the more Saroon focused build, maybe can see if that has more of a chance to shine now. I don't see any data on that right now.
It's tough to get Saroon out, to like tunnel vision Saroon and then get things rolling. I think it's tough in the face of some of the other things going on.
Yeah, it's hard to kind of just survive, especially if you're having to save your AoE for dealing damage with Saroon, and therefore you can't use it to like survive. So, but it seems like more aggressive Elemental Mage has survived. I just think, it's hard to balance again that like people like the over the top finishing as like that made the deck I think a lot more interesting to people when you had like that plus the Saroon and had enough flexibility with it. But on the other hand, I do understand it could be a lot of damage, and for people who wanted to play a little slower, it was like a lot of inevitability on the Lamplighter.
Yeah, I mean it does suck when you're trying to play around everything and then you die from 24 when they have an empty board, right? Like that's just, and that is something that the deck does, but at least like when Saroon's been played, you kind of know that you're going to have to deal with that. Like when they just like, oh yeah, I've got both Lamplighters, you're dead, right? That was felt bad. And they could still do damage, but just not kill you directly. But again, this is because there's so much armor and so much lifesteal that you needed to be able to do that much burst damage. So, that's where we were. So that's where you are more reliant on getting Saroon in those matchups. Yeah.
This is one that I more strongly feel that they could have just put it back to 3 mana 3/2.
Yeah, that I would agree with you. I think that would have been fine.
Because like 3 mana 3/2 deal 4, sure. That's fine.
Yeah.
Maybe that
sure, even to hit a minion sometimes.
Well, then you have Rogue, right? So that's probably the concern.
Not to, because then it's just Gyreworm. Then it's actually the same card. Or wait,
no, Gyreworm is 4 mana deal 5.
Sorry, not that one. There was another Gyre elemental.
Oh,
that was
the
a 3 mana 3/2.
Gyre or something, yeah.
That dealt 3 damage, and so this would just be a strictly upscaled one if it dealt 4 as a 3 mana 3/2.
Yeah. I mean, they've done strictly upscaled cards before.
And also because of Sonya.
No, but that doesn't matter because you want to know how people.
It's still a fair amount of damage if they want to do it that way.
It's still a fair amount of damage. It doesn't compare to pressure points, though.
Well, I mean, yes, but it's still something that again. This is Sonya. It doesn't matter that it's not like the best thing that you can do. It's still another thing that you can do with stupid Sonya tricks, right? Because that's still a fairly decent amount of damage to close out a game with just Sonya. So again, Sonya making everyone's lives miserable passively or actively, but that's neither here nor there. And also dodged another nerf, by the way. So
yeah, I would still have liked to see Lamplighter, down a cost. You could make it, I don't know what you do with that, but I'm not necessarily we can't have Sonya because I think she's been sort of single-handedly enabling rogues, which is very popular. But I could also see the argument for doing something about Sonya. Anyway, the other mage card that was hit was Seabreeze Chalice. This was hit pretty hard in that it no longer goes face, it only hits minions. So the good news is that if you are trying to use it to clear, it will now actually just clear. The bad news is, if you are a fan of Chalice Druid OTKs, literally just not a thing anymore.
Yeah.
Just can't do it.
It is a better clear now. So I wonder / hope if maybe someone can come up with a tempo mage style thing with Ethereal Oracle and Seabreeze Chalices and
Pat also
sea
sent
shanty.
a Rainbow Mage. Let me see if I can find this. With Oracle, and I think it had Chalice, and it had Rayla, but it was a Rainbow Mage. I will share it. It wasn't one that he made, it was one that he found on HS Guru, but, play at your own risk. But it is a thing, so maybe that'll be something that we can do again. I feel like that was like the quintessential example of this is an OTK, but it's slow enough and almost everyone liked it. Like, for a deck of its type, I think it had the fewest haters and the most fans that I can think of.
Yeah, I mean, Chalice Druid is kind of what I was referring to when I said there's too much math involved, right? Because
sure,
I died to a 98 damage Chalice the other day, like before the nerfs, right? We talked about that I think on last week's show, and it's like I that's too much math to figure out how that's supposed to work, but also it feels really bad to lose to that. But also this is again another issue with the tourist mechanic is now you're really nerfing Druid, but you're also hitting Mage with collateral damage. I mean, Mage was still using it to some extent, but it wasn't doing the crimes that Druid was doing.
No, yeah, Mage was not the one doing big damage with Seabreeze Chalice because Mage doesn't have Aulonius. Yeah,
right.
But
yes,
I hope that it still sees play. I think it might be a better Mage card with this change.
Yeah.
Because it becomes like a decent clear then. We'll have to see.
You get it out of that location occasionally. Like it'll get generated enough, right? In Mage that it'll probably still see play even if you're not putting it in a deck on purpose.
And it does become something where you can like reliably clear that early board with a couple of them. Or, clear a couple minions, get rid of an annoying gold panner, something like that. Speaking of cards that were not nerfing the classes they come from, we have Conniving Conman and Seashell were both reverted to say, instead of repeat or discount your next non-rogue card, they now say another class. So it does not work in Mage and Paladin like it did before. You cannot Conman your Tsunami or your Living Horizon. You could Conman another rogue card.
You can Conman your Conman.
I don't know that you would be wanting to do that. Or if you're in rogue, you can use Conman to repeat some burgled something or like a burgled starship piece or something if you wanted to. But they are no longer the put this in Paladin or Mage to repeat your Paladin or Mage cards.
Which I'm kind of bummed. Like, I'm glad to hit Big Spell Mage, to be clear. And I think that's the deck these changes were for. I liked being able to Conman to repeat the Libram weapon, because that was a kind of nice way you could escalate your discounts quickly. And so I'm sad not to be able to have that anymore. If they did something like it only repeats something that costs 5 or less, maybe so it can't do the big spells, but you can still get your the Libram weapon or other small things. I would have been okay with that, but I guess it's fine. I just don't know what these are for anymore, right? Because
they're for Burgle Rogue. That's what they're for.
But it's in the expansion with the tourist stuff, right? So
Rogue can use it for their tourist stuff. But I mean, this has always been dumb, right? Like it was. This is one that I really, again, and I know I've gotten on my high horse about this, and I apologize that I'm about to get back on my high horse about this, but like, this is why I get really nervous about buffs in general, right? Because like these buffs and the tsunami buff was similar, made no sense to me because we were getting big spell mage support a month later. I do not understand why we needed to, and why we did this knowing that there was going to be an additional class that was going to be getting a tourist, because these were done right before the mini set for perils came out, right? So they knew that we were getting another tourist into another class, in another class that was going to be able to use this, that was touring into rogue specifically, and that was going to be doing big spell mage things. And even if they hadn't, like Pipsy Paladin was also abusing this. Like we were getting Pipsy out on 5, we were getting Amadis out on 5, and like that does not make sense to me. That clearly was, I mean, maybe that was the intent, but I don't think it was, right? I mean, it wasn't, because that wasn't how it was designed, right? That was kind of a big change in the tourist expansion specifically that had pretty massive implications and was immediately invalidated a month later when the mini set came out. Like there was no need to make these cards that much stronger because they got those decks got enough support. I do not understand it, and I really hope that this is, I mean, I'm sure that they're doing retros and whatever. I hope that this is something, I'm glad they're trying things. I hope that this is going to be a lesson for them to, when they start thinking about doing something again, to at least like think of the context that's going to be in the immediate next like 3 months of cards that are going to be coming out.
I mean, I think it's a cool design to have the repeated, but I can see why they wanted to revert Conman, because otherwise Mage and Paladin both have repeat any card in this class for the next year and a half.
I mean, I think what's strange about it is that it exists in this form at all in the expansion that involves touring, right? Because
yes.
Because saying from another class means that Rogue needs to have things that you want to play again if you're touring into Rogue, and it doesn't. Because for the Rogue, they can't replay those things. It has to be focused on the stuff that they burgle. So unless you're expecting to tour into Rogue to then burgle things, which I thought was just 1-cost spells, and then like discount or replay those, it just... I liked Tourist from sort of an ideological standpoint, but I feel like it gets so complex that you have to do a lot more serious consideration of how things are interacting. And at least in this case, it doesn't feel like that happened. I kind of feel like that didn't really happen with Rogue touring into Warlock either.
No.
Yeah, that might have been part of the issue. If you're repeating, right, because Rogue couldn't use it to repeat its own tourist, really, because there was nothing it wanted to do with that. I also think like the fact that it was Mage and Paladin, like if it had just been Paladin, especially also if you didn't have like Seashell and Conman together, because Seashell means that you can cheat it out early and then you can repeat it. And then, of course, Mage also had the tourist allowing you to cheat stuff out early and lots of other ways to cheat it out early. But even in Paladins, like if you didn't have Seashell making your Pipsy or your Amethyst cost 5 so that then you can repeat it on 6, so that then you can repeat it on 7, like that would be a little less egregious.
And you also had Metal Detector that was also effectively discounting everything by giving you more coins on top of everything else.
Right.
Too.
And like, what are you going to Seashell to discount your Metal Detector, to discount your Conman, to discount your Eudora?
I guess you could make a 1-mana Robocaller. People were running the 2/1 1-drop robot to make that cheaper. So maybe, but not really. I mean, maybe if you wanted to get like a cheap Knick-Knack Shack, I don't know. But
the reason to run something like Seashell is to make something expensive cheaper, not to get a 1 mana 3/2 alongside your 3 mana 3/2 or your 3 mana 3/2 weapon. So it's just one of these things where it's like, so touring into that class does not give you meaningful uses for Seashell and Conman unless they worked the way that they changed them to. But then, of course, that change was a bit too powerful.
So, I mean, I think we can agree, like, it makes more thematic sense, but also wasn't how it was designed. But the next change, is Sleep Under the Stars. Went from 7 mana to 8 mana. Still good.
Yeah.
I don't know what else to say about that. Still a good card.
Make it cost more. Fine. It doesn't matter. Druid has infinite mana. It doesn't matter.
Quasar went from 6 mana to 8 mana. Dev comment, yeah, are bad. They say, every expansion, we like to make a few, quote, dreamy cards that get players thinking about how far they can push the game. These cards aren't supposed to be the most competitively viable. The fun of them is wondering, what if? Quasar mostly fell into that category. It certainly got the dreamers cooking, and it hasn't turned out to be a competitive power outlier, but the experiences when this card does work are too sharp and end games too early, turning the dream into a nightmare to play against.
Yep.
That basically says it.
Yeah. I mean, it's not even that it was too hard, too easy to do. It's just that, like, once you've caught the car, it's actually just not that much fun for anybody once it actually starts happening. Like, I think this is less, oh, this is coming out too early, than like, we just want to make it so that people don't do this because this was a mistake to do this in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Rogue also got another hit with Everything Must Go, going from 8 mana to 9 mana. And what I was seeing with Cycle Rogue, which was still existing, is they just drop the robocallers, drop the Everything Must Go, continue on with, like, Ethereal Oracle. And they have their giants, and they bounce their giants. And if that doesn't work, then they can, like, Incendius, because they drew their whole deck. And seems to be working fine.
Rogue finds a way.
Yeah, this one kind of bummed me out a little because I feel like it was an interesting shift to having the robocallers and doing this special drawing. It is that targeted draw thing I mentioned, though, of like, okay, you were running draw mech, so you could get your robocallers, so you could get your Icall spells. You're running Proto Drake for that. That was pretty cool. I guess I could see how when you got really good at it, it would just like really consistently get your Everything Must Go's played quite early.
Yeah, top legend, it was not. It was a lot of games with an Everything Must Go on 3 or 4.
But it's one of those ones where it's like, okay, well, now it's like this is a killed card.
Yeah.
That's fine.
You could just buff Robocaller to have 7s instead of 8s. Nothing could go wrong. I do hope that they thought about that, because I think it's a cool idea. I don't know whether they thought about it and there was some reason I'm not thinking of that it was a bad idea. We also had a couple hits for Shaman. Malted Magma now only hits minions. And Wave of Nostalgia went from 5 mana to 6 mana.
Yeah.
I was a little unhappy at first seeing the Malted Magma change, but I think Shaman's doing fine.
Yeah.
It's still got ways to have damage. That goes to the face. And Malted Magma, is still a tool that can control boards. I don't know whether, I'm sure it comes out of Sumless.
I don't even know that it does. I mean, this is one of those cards that, like, every so often we get a nerf. It's like, well, this is good enough. It doesn't also have to go face, right? And like Malted Magma was good enough, and it didn't need to go face.
It was good enough once it got Oracle.
Yeah, I mean, it got Oracle. They were running Novice Zappers. Like, they have spell damage totem. Like, there's enough spell damage in that deck that you could do a fairly significant chunk of damage to somebody's face with this. And like, you know, if you're gonna I mean, I think Asteroid Shaman is good, but you were able to do like so much chip damage with the Malted Magma because of just all the spell damage you just naturally had in the deck, that this makes it more like focused on the asteroids and the Incendius. So, which I think is better for the deck, just flavor wise, if nothing else.
Yeah, and the clear is still good, right? Like, one of the reasons Malted Magma was great is it gave you so much game against board-based aggro decks and things where you're just going, like, on 3, basically getting a Consecration with Zapper and Malted Magma, or, later on, you do it with Ethereal Oracle. Being able to do these big spell damage Malted Magma clears was great. And then, awesome getting face damage as well, but I don't think necessary with the potential damage that deck can do with rocks. Like,
yeah. It doesn't, you don't need, like, give it a little bit more challenge, right? It doesn't need to do it. And Wave of Nostalgia, just like, that can wait a turn. I think that's fine.
And that's definitely, I think at a certain point they were sitting there with all these nerfs. You have to start being like, well, this will be, the man left standing is the deck that's just gonna take over everything, and that would have been Wave Shaman probably. I think, and if you bring everything down, then it's probably still good. Then you argue about, like, well, if you bring everything down, did you bring nothing down? But anyway, we already had our
there was an old
discussion.
woman who swallowed a firefly, right? Like, so.
All right. Death Knight got a couple of nerfs. Threads of Despair went from 2 mana to 3 mana. Good.
I don't like that one.
I mean, Threads was just if you don't play Death Knight, you don't see all the times that it doesn't work, right? Because it feels like you're only seeing it when it's going to be a full clear, but it was a full clear a lot. And it doesn't really, like, being able to go hero power Threads on 4 to clear a full board, that can wait till 5. I think that's okay. Death Knight's got enough other removal that it's fine. Threads has just been too good for a while anyway. And I mean, that card started at 1 mana. Like, can we just take a second to recognize that?
1 mana was too good.
Yeah.
But I don't know about 3. I'm not sure, like, where it is in power level compared to Defile. Clearly they think it's stronger if they're moving it to 3, because Defile is still 2. But I don't know. It puts Death Knight in a tough position, I feel like.
For now, right? Like, I think the problem is that we're going to have Threads for another year, and you really, like, what other Death Knight removal are you printing? Right? Because anything that you're going to print has to be better than Threads, or at least like on a not necessarily, or at least like as good as Threads. And Threads is too good. So I think that bringing that down just kind of opens up the design space for them a little bit too.
I mean, it goes to show, I think, that it's really hard to evaluate changes without, I really like to play this deck, or I really don't like to face this deck.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, for me, I've had so many Salt Mine posts about Threads of Despair, which it is true. I almost always only see it when it's going to full clear my board.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they wouldn't play it, and I don't even know it's in their hand. But there's so many times where it's like 4 mana full board clear, sometimes even with pretty high health, can just feel not great. And you don't necessarily have to line it up in quite the same way you do a Defile. You have to line up the first couple hits to work, and then it'll clear everything.
Board full of 5/5s is a pain.
Yes, I am sure it is.
You shouldn't be able to develop behind it as often as you can. I think that's really what it comes down to.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
Next one, though, Reska, I think is solid. Like, I have noticed it being harder to discount to 0 or discount to playability.
Yeah, she went from 20 mana to 25 mana. But of course, she still discounts.
And there's so much Reborn, and there's so many, like, minions that drop minions now. Like, compared to when they released her, that 25 feels reasonable compared to 20. Like, it was coming down way too... Like, there are definitely some games in the past couple weeks where it's like, there's no way they have a Reska. And they sure did. And they blew me out because I had the audacity to play 2 minions on the board at the same time. So, yeah, I think that having that come down a little bit later that's fine.
This thing is my only defense against druids, right? If they are allowed to get rolling, if they play Dungar or Hydration Station, and this is not cheap enough, It's not happening.
It's like when you play with the Ceaseless Expanse, you sit there where you're like, it can't save me yet. Oh no, it can't save me yet. Whereas where you play against the Ceaseless Expanse, you're just like, oh my god, every time. It just gets me.
Yeah.
So the deck tracker now, even on Mac, will show you how discounted the Ceaseless Expanse is, and I gotta say that's really nice. Obviously, if you don't play with deck tracker, then that's harder to know if you don't have it yourself in your hand, because there's no way you're counting that yourself. All right, we also got one change to Priest. Funnel Cake went from 1 mana to 2 mana.
Was it to Priest?
Yeah, that's a change to Druid.
That's true.
That's another time that Priest is paying for Druid's crimes. Yeah.
Catching strays.
Yeah. I saw this and I'm like, really? Priest is praying for Druid's crimes? And we really need it still.
Yeah, I mean, Overheal Priest was doing fine too, so.
Yeah, it is a problem for Overheal Priest. I think some other decks just cut it, try to run some other healing for clergy or run something else. I really hope we get some draw soon that's not clergy based. Probably if you are doing an Overheal Priest, you do still run it, but 100% cost increase. It now is at best an innervate in terms of mana, and it's a much more situational one. There have to be 3 minions next to each other that can be healed to full, and you have to have 2 extra mana to do it, and you have to remember to do this and get rid of all your old muscle memory about how to play this card. I did play a little bit with it because I just didn't change the automaton list that I got, and I was like, it doesn't belong in this list. That's not an Overheal list anymore. Like, unless you want that heal, it's not worth it. But apparently Zaremi Priest is still like the best deck in the game.
Not surprised.
And there still is, we were talking there still is that like slower Zaremi Priest I think might actually have more of a shot now with less direct damage going on. That we talked about last week. We won't necessarily go through all of that all over again, but fast Zaremi Priest, definitely good to play. Pain Priest is still doing fine, more than fine, and Automaton Priest was doing okay for me, and it definitely wasn't an optimal list. So Priest will survive this. At least aggressive Priest will survive this, which are the ones that were mostly getting those. I mean, it is true that when you got the Funnel Cake, like on 3 or 4, you could do some absolutely gross stuff. And that's really fun for me. And it's not necessarily super fun for my opponent, so I get it. It makes the ceiling a little lower while not really changing the floor of the aggressive pace of the deck, which was already still pretty fast.
And it's going to make it a lot harder for Druid to use that to just get more damage. I mean, not that they're playing Chalices anyway, because the Chalices don't go face anymore, but they were often using the Funnel Cakes just on the opposing minions just to get more draw and more mana to do what they're going to do. And now at most it's 1 mana if your opponent has 3 minions on board, and they haven't positioned them around a location or a starship or whatever other junk ends up on the board that can split up a board.
Yeah, see, for me, they always got the 3 because I was always playing wide and I was running funnel, so I was purposely playing my minions next to each other.
Right.
But lots of people are running things now that break up that chain.
Does anyone understand this next one?
Yeah, I do, because 2 mana Hollowhounds are dumb.
So Mystery Egg went from it costs 4 less to it costs 3 less.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was playing Egg Hunter. That deck was dumb. You get so many Hollowhounds and so many, like, I had multiple King Plushes wiping boards that were buffed up with Bestial Madness, and like, though the minions don't need to cost 4 less. They can cost 3 less. It'll be fine.
Okay. I have not seen that much, or had not seen that much Egg Hunter, so I guess I saw it occasionally, but didn't realize it was an issue.
It might have been, again, just like, it was definitely high enough in the pack that when you nerf all the other stuff that's high in the pack.
Yeah.
And I was seeing a lot of people talking about like Starship and Discover Hunters today. So that is another thing that I want to check out a little bit more.
So maybe that's just kind of reminding people that Hunter has other cards that they got in this set that they don't have to play Mystery Egg. Maybe. I don't know.
Our last, they put it under Nerfs because it is sort of a nerf. This is for Wild. Order in the Court now draws a card again. Dev comment, on its face, this looks like a buff. But the intent of this change is to pull back a play pattern, warping the Wild metagame. With the introduction of the Ceaseless Expanse, the deck got a payoff worth going all in on in a way that made the deck faster and more consistent than ever before. This change will still allow for big plays while skipping over the turn 500 damage Holy Wrath target.
So if you don't know, so what they would do is they would put the Ceaseless Expanse in the deck. They would order in the court. Order in the court would reorder the deck from highest cost to lowest cost. No matter how many cards you've drawn, the cost in deck is 100. And then they would play Holy Wrath, which is a very old card that is 5 mana, that draws a card and deals damage equal to its cost to any target. So they would draw a card and kill you no matter how much armor you had, unless you were really doing like really stupid stuff. So one thing that's worth noting, if you are the person and you should dust all these things at least, because you can always recraft them. We say this every time we have a balance patch. You should go through, if you search refund, you'll find all these cards, and then you can just go through and dust them. You have to change your collection to Wild to see this. So this is what is it, like 100 dust per rare that you get back, I think.
Yeah, it's a rare. So
this is several hundred dust that may be in your collection that you may not catch if you're just typing in refund and dusting all the standard cards. So that's where it's important for you, even if you're not playing Wild. They had to do this just because like people were dying from 100 life.
Well, they had to do this so they could unban Ceaseless Expanse.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So.
Yes, there is a level of OTK that needs to have either Ceaseless Expanse banned or this. And yes, so now with this change, the Ceaseless Expanse is unbanned in Wild. All right, we also got a bunch of buffs. We'll try to go through these. Their dev comment is, when we looked at the Great Beyond data, we found some cards with room for buffs, so we've made adjustments across a wide range of new cards with an emphasis on promoting the expansion's marquee archetypes. Now, one thing that they don't say here, but that's probably worth noting, is like this is still the first, so there's a lot of buffs here. Some of them, I would say, especially like Interstellar Star Slicer, are pretty significant, but a lot of them maybe, they didn't hit like every Great Dark Beyond archetype. Not all of them were pushed super, super hard. They don't necessarily want to do the Tsunami Conman thing on the first patch, or like an Edwin thing when that got buffed, right? So they're probably trying to push the new expansion without having to pull way back on the next patch or something like that. So I'm sure that's something that they were considering when doing these.
And also they just don't know how much of these were being held down because the cards weren't strong enough and how much they were being held down because the other archetypes were too strong.
Yeah. I suspect there will be another round of buffs when the next balance patch hits, but these were some conservative ones to things that did need help.
So, for example, Ascara went from a 5-mana 4/5 to a 4-mana 4/4. Only seen one person playing. Talking about Drana High Priest still today. I think it's still not it, because it doesn't improve what Ascara is doing for you.
Which is nothing. So yeah, that's. It's like it still hasn't answered what are the Draenei that we're summoning a copy of, and they're probably not getting more of them in the mini set because the mini set is StarCraft. So I don't know what we're supposed to do with Ascara, but maybe we'll get some new Draenei in the next set.
That is gonna be really awkward for their usual flow because I would fully expect under normal circumstances to see more Draenei in the mini set. But if
there
it's all
are no
StarCraft,
Zerg Draenei. I'm pretty sure I did not see any Draenei in StarCraft. I played those games a lot.
I mean, it is kind of a mashup. But that is a good point. Are there going to be Draenei? I can see an argument both ways. That is kind of weird. We also got, one thing that I think would help the Draenei a lot is if you did something with Velen. I could see like changing his death rattle to a battle cry might be too insane. I'm sure they were thinking about it.
Yeah.
Maybe something like the battle cry, like he repeats all the battle cries as a battle cry, and then he repeats all the death rattles as a death rattle. I don't know whether that would work.
I don't know.
They also got a couple changes to Demon Hunter. Deirdre, Rebel Captain, went from draw 1 crewmate on her death rattle to draw 2 crewmates. Okay. And Verne, Recruiter, went from 1-3 to 2-3.
Deirdre. I do agree with Zacho on this one. It just feels like such a misguided design. Shuffling crewmates into your deck is a downside. It is not a good thing. You do not want to top deck crewmates. Unless you have some insane draw engine, it is not good enough. I feel like this could be no shuffles, no drawing, just for the rest of the game, at the end of your turn, you get a crewmate to your hand. And I don't think that would be insane.
Or if the crewmates like had base rush or had like an aura, like give adjacent crewmates your ability, or like, I don't know, something.
It is kind of flavorful that playing the Among Us card sabotages your deck. Sure. Oh, we should say before we go to the Paladin buffs, Verne Recruiter, because we have to read these cards because most people have not seen them in a while. Verne Recruiter is the two. It's going to be a 2-mana 2/3. At the end of your turn, you get a 4/4 crewmate in your hand. So it's going from a 1/3 to a 2/3. So that's sure.
If that archetype's going to be playable, you're playing Verne Recruiter. So
yeah,
I don't think the stats are necessarily the problem with that, but sure.
Okay. Yeah.
Paladin though. So Interstellar Star Slicer, which is the weapon that has death rattle reduce your Librams, went from a 2/3 to a 3/2. So it is a more powerful weapon, and you get the discount a turn earlier.
Well, it's doing the same amount of damage total, right? Because you're still doing 6 damage over the life of the weapon. You're just doing it in 2 swings rather than 3. But the more important thing is that it's discounting the Librams sooner.
Well, and it clears something with 3 health.
Yeah, right.
It didn't
Yeah.
before.
Yeah. I mean, that I think was the best thing they could buff for Librams. I think the next would be making that Divine Shield minion not cost 4, because that's just really tough, right? Like, playing a 4-mana 4/2 Divine Shield really, really hurts. And you don't really have other stuff going on in your early game. So, because if you're playing
instrument tech.
Right, you're playing a 2-mana 1/2 on 2 to get the weapon, then you play the weapon. And then, I mean, I guess it's a curve, but I would like to see, rather than a 4-mana 4/2 Divine Shield, like a 4-mana 2/4 Taunt, even. Like, it's just, it's really tough to get those played.
Yeah, I mean, I could see when my opponent has been able to play their 4-mana 4/2 Divine Shield and then buff it with the Libram that gives +3/+3 and returns itself to the hand, that can be hard to clear and then just do a ton of damage face, but you do have to have space to get it down. I also saw a list that just didn't even run it and was just like all in on just get the weapon and don't bother discounting the 6-mana one all the way because it's still fine for 2 mana.
Yeah, I'd be okay with that if we could still con man the weapon. But without being able to do that, that means you must get both weapons and do both uses of them. And that I feel like is tough without an additional way of like drawing or replaying the weapon.
Yeah, fair enough, because you need to get like both instrument techs or like naturally, you have to get like 3 out of 4 of those things.
And it's nice to get the discounts for Yrel as well.
I mean, it's not going to be Librams if we don't have to go through at least 2 rounds of buffs before it becomes really viable. So,
I mean, I've been seeing a lot of Libram Paladins today, but it does have its problems, like getting through Unkill-X's with hydration stations. Not its favorite, not most decks' favorite thing, to be fair. We also had a buff to Yrel, Beacon of Hope. Went from a 5 mana 4/3 to a 4 mana 3/3, and this is I need to go back and reread what this card says specifically.
It's a 4 mana 3/3 with Rush. Death Rattle, get 3 different live rooms from an older timeline. There's only one older timeline.
Yeah, but notably, it doesn't include the old Libram weapon. It's just, it is always Wisdom, and which is the 2 cost +1/+1 Death Rattle. It goes back to your hand spell, and then Justice, I believe.
Justice is the one that sets something's health to 1, because I got blown out by that today.
Yeah, all opponents stuff to 1 health, and it gives you a 1/4 weapon. And then I forget what it's called.
Hope, I think, is the Divine Shield, heal you for 8. Divine Shield 8/8, heal you for 8.
Yeah. So there's, I mean, and that's a fun card, but it can sometimes be silly. What I think is most silly that I've seen a Libram Paladin do is with Lanessa, get like 4 0 cost, give +3/+3, return yourself to your hand at the end of the turn.
Yeah, that's the strategy.
That is the dream, right?
I don't think it's necessary, but you can also run Leadrin, who will replay all of the ones not replay. She'll put into your hand all the things you played on your minions. Characters, perhaps, but so that also is a way to get a bunch of them.
I think it is characters, yeah, because I think you can get Libram of Hope back from it too, or you couldn't way back when, at least. Yeah,
when I've gotten it to work, right, you Leroy for 30 plus because you have all these 0 mana +3/+3 buffs.
30% of the time, it works every time.
Or you just control the board with it. If they don't clear something, then they're just dead. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I could see having Leroy there as a backup in case they do just clear everything every single turn. Or you need to clear a taunt first. We also got a couple buffs to various starships. Fellfire Thrusters, which is the Warlock spellburst, deal this minion's attack damage to 2 random enemy minions. It went from a 3 mana 2/3 to a 3 mana 2/4. Shatari Cloakfield is the Druid elusive. Your first spell each turn costs 1 less starship piece. That went from a 2 mana 1/3 to a 2 mana 1/4. And then there was a bunch of rogue starship changes as well. The Gravitational Displacer, which is their legendary starship piece that when it's launched summons a copy of the starship. That went from a 4/3 to a 5/4, which also, like, all these changes do also buff the starship itself.
Yeah, and most importantly, the starship toughness for the most part, which is relevant.
And then some of the support cards for Rogue Starship got buffed as well. Starship Schematic was 1 mana, discover a starship piece from another class. Now that starship piece costs 1 less. And Scrounging Shipwright, 2 mana 3/2 Draenei, Battlecry. Previously it was Death Rattle, get a random starship piece from another class. Now it's Battlecry, get a random starship piece from another class.
Yeah, I have not personally messed with this at all, but I know that Clark has been doing some ridiculous stuff with Starship Rogue, and I think people are excited to do these things, particularly with Scrounging Shipwright being a Battlecry rather than a Death Rattle now. It feels a lot cleaner. Having Gravitational Displacer not be like embarrassing stats the turn you play it. I think that stuff's looking good. Warlock just hasn't had a reason to do starships, really.
I can see working it into Wheellock. I think there's potentially an argument for it, but yeah, it's like there's just so much other stuff that you want to do in that deck that you're probably not going to find the room for it.
Cloakfield, I did see. I don't know how common it is, but I think just the fact that it's a little bit harder to kill, it makes you more likely to get that discount. And, maybe it helps you fight a little bit on early board. I mean, I could see worlds where it costs 2, right? So you coin it out on 1, and then it lets you do your wild growth on 2 still.
Yeah. And then Rogue gets it and makes their starship elusive, which is very annoying. But that's on brand for Rogue, so
yeah.
I do think that the Rogue Starship, I mean, I know it's very much not your cup of tea, Wicked, but it is, I think, a clever design for Rogue, and that it feels like Rogue, it's burgling. you wouldn't want Rogue Starship to have kind of the other Rogue feel of like, we're just going to like bounce this thing a million times and then we're going to like at least more than necessary. And I can see it being like, for someone like Clark, I can see him just like loving this deck because every game you're assembling a somewhat different starship and having to figure out how do you deal with a somewhat different combination of cards, but it's not a huge pool of things, so you kind of know what you can get.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the issue I have with it, right? Is that it's a very limited pool, so you do know what you're going to get, and that's the same problem I have with Stick Up, right? It's like where it's a small pool and it's never getting bigger. So, well, I guess maybe it's going to get a little bigger in the mini set, but it's not going to get much bigger. So you're generally going to know what you're getting, and what you're getting is generally pretty good.
I don't know that that's a bad thing, because I think if it's completely random, then you're just really mad because you have no idea at all what to play against. And then
but then also people will lose with it more and then stop playing it, hopefully.
They'll never stop playing with it.
Or if they keep playing it, then I won't have to queue into them anymore. So either way, it's a win for me.
There's a couple more. Or first, so is there more to say on the Rogue?
I was gonna say that it doesn't matter that much that Shipwright is a battle cry either, because they don't want to step that; they want to step the Exodar.
Yep.
Yes. So the Exodar went from an 8-mana 6/10 to a 7-mana 6/8. Dev comment, this change is particularly spicy. We wanted to make sure Starships got a chance to shine, but we'll keep an eye on this one after all the changes go live to make sure we didn't push too far.
I actually think it feels good and hasn't been crazy, right? We expected Exodar to be like, oh my god, all over the place, too powerful, neutral, legendary, but actually then there weren't a lot of Starship decks running Exodar.
Right, even the ones that were running Starships were not running Exodar, so yeah, I don't think they're going to have to walk this one back. Maybe you can clip this and it'll be completely terrible in the future, but my day 2 impression is I don't think they're going to have to walk this one back.
Yeah.
There was also, I noticed down here, just a small Starship change. Dimensional Core, which was the Divine Shield Starship piece, went from a 3-mana 3/2 to a 2-mana 2/2.
Very impactful, in my opinion. Shielded Minibot is good.
Yeah.
And I'm running it in my Frosty Ships deck. And feels great on curve. It's nice to have both this and the 2-mana 2/2 Rush Reborn as like solid turn 2 plays. It's also just nice since several Starships care about power, to be able to have this as a 2-mana play, and then usually you've got like a 3-cost Starship piece into Arcanite Defense Crystal, into whatever. Like it just gives you a lot more ability to get that curve of pieces to boost the power of your Starship quickly, so that you can launch it anywhere between 5 and 7. Often, if like you've been playing pieces constantly, feels pretty solid now.
Yeah. The curve really, because there's so many 3 costs and then Arcanite Crystal is just like required. It makes sense that curve makes a big difference. And if you are weaving it in later, it's much easier to weave in. And no one was playing Dimensional Core really before this.
No.
Finally, we got a couple Draenei changes. Ace Wayfinder, which was the battle cry, gained 2 random bonus effects. The next Draenei you play gains them as well. Went from a 5-mana 5/5 to a 4-mana 4/4. That's neutral.
Sure.
And Astral Vigilant is not a Draenei, but Draenei related. It's the battle cry, get a copy of the last Draenei you played. It went from a 1-mana 1/1 to a 1-mana 1/2.
Sure.
I haven't seen either of these, but I don't think it's I don't think it's those cards' problem. I think it's mostly just the Draenei are.
It's tough to make a new tribe whole cloth. Like, I don't know to what extent Undead hit right away either.
Yeah, they needed some time.
Yeah.
I think there were more old cards for them to make into Undead.
Yeah.
Which probably helped.
Yeah. I mean, they tried to do Undead Matters in March of the Lich King, and a lot of those didn't really hit. But the Undead stuff, ended up happening later, and it's fine. It's just a problem because that's like the marquee. It's the other marquee mechanic from the set, and I don't know that like this is the problem I have with buffing. I have a lot of problems with buffing. But it's like you can't you can there are some cards that you can't change the numbers on to make them good. And it doesn't even matter like what it says on the card itself, is that it doesn't have enough support, and there's no amount of buffing that you can do to make that into a viable card without printing more cards.
I mean, I think again, this is their first round. I don't think they're necessarily thinking like this is single-handedly going to make Draenei Priest and Draenei Warrior the thing to do. I think they're just trying to like Ace Wayfinder does become much more likely to be useful if it has a package later. And they might just have needed more time to come up with what they want to do with the Draenei package. Like I think it is true that sometimes there are unbuffable archetypes. I don't know that we're there for Draenei yet. I don't think that these changes do very much yet. But I could see like the Ace Wayfinder potentially being impactful if we do end up with a good shell for it.
And I don't want to make it seem like I'm in Homer Simpson, you tried your best and you failed miserably. The lesson is never try territory, right? Like I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that like if some of these things are just not going to be playable without more cards, and then when they do get more cards, then they're broken. We've seen that already, right? So that's where I get a little nervous when we're trying to buff things into relevance that just are not, they're just not there. Like the deck isn't there. Like Askar is a great example of that. Like there's no amount of numbers you're going to change on that card that are going to answer the question for me, what am I summoning the second of? Unless maybe it's Arcanite. Mm-hmm. Like maybe that's the answer, but even that doesn't sound like a great answer, right? So like that's the issue that I have with it, with some of the buffs to the Draenei, but and it seems like that's borne out, but we'll see what happens in like a future set. Maybe they have more Draenei coming.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say that applies to buffs broadly, but certainly it feels to me that Draenei are a mid-range mechanic, and one of the things that can happen with mid-rangey stuff is that you are too slow to get going against the aggro decks, and so they roll you over. And you can do some powerful things, but again, because you're a little slower than the aggro decks, the other stuff has done their powerful thing too. And you may be powerful, but you're not punch through an Unkiliax powerful, or punch through a bunch of, Arcanite crystal starships powerful. And so while we saw some big numbers of attack coming out of Draenei Warrior, it's still a kind of like play one minion at a time deck. And that's tough into aggro, and that's tough into a taunt.
Especially a taunt that makes armor. Yeah.
Yeah. And trying to shift gears a little bit and make something like sort of menagerie to play into Exarch has had kind of, consistency issues and still trouble, still being like a little bit slower, a little bit mid-rangey in terms of trying to punch through things. So yeah, Draenei I think is gonna be tough for them to make hit, particularly if they don't have a mini set with more coming. That really feels like a challenge.
Yeah.
Well, we will have to see what they do about that. But that is all of the standard changes in this patch. There were a bunch of Battleground changes in this patch, basically making adjustments to cards that will be leaving at the end of the season. No hero adjustments. Decided not to make significant changes to any heroes at that time because they expect the meta to change significantly in 31.2. And they'll be better able to adjust them when trinkets are rotated out. Anyway, we're not going to talk about the details of those updates for the same reason we didn't talk about the details of the new Battleground season, but you can see them in the show notes. and the actual patch notes. The one bug fix we wanted to call out here was that various Discover cards, Master's Call, Font of Power, Crystal Song Portal, Omega Assembly, Marut Stonebinder, and some PvE cards, so this is mostly wild stuff, have been adjusted to more clearly and accurately account for cards gained through Discover versus alternative effects. We don't normally give refunds for these types of bug fixes / general rules updates, and these changes won't have any gameplay impact in most games, but we've decided to include Master's Call in this patch's refund period due to its specific changed interaction with alien encounters.
Keep in mind that's only copies of Master's Call that you have opened in packs and not that you have been granted from the core set. So if you dust your copies of Master's Call, you're going to have to craft them again if you want to play with them in Wild, which I understand is not a concern for everybody, but I'm just saying it because it's easy to forget what is actually in your collection and what's not.
Although, you'll have that dust to be able to make it again. But yes, that is an important thing to know.
If you haven't spent it on something else by then.
That's true. Depending on how much liquid dust you actually have. So, all right. But that will do it for a very long balance patch and for our show.
So we have many folks we'd like to thank. Check out our thanks section on our website at Concede.com, where you can find our contact for our show notes and our Patreon information. You can monetarily support our show at patreon.com/Concede. Join us every live by following us on Twitch at twitch.concede.com. Join our community chats in our Discord at discord.concede.com. And write into our email at coinconcede@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter and Blue Sky at CoinConcede. And if you would like some CC swag, head on over to our shop at shop.coinconcede.com.
Oh, and there's going to be a Black Friday sale on the merch that I will add to the show. I will add the code to the show notes.
Oh, excited.
I just got an email about that today. We don't control that. That's just the platform that does that. But I will make sure to put that into the show notes if you're thinking about buying any swag. It makes a lovely gift for the holidays.
It includes our Unity Precision Perfection in the style of Live, Laugh, Love.
A gift of the tell your family to get you this gift variety.
Yes. Well, I mean, if you do, if you happen to be let's say redecorating your living room and need some new home decor, then that's something you could include.
I was thinking, do I need new pillows for this couch?
There you go. You did it.
I just have to. Well, and now I got my husband into Hearthstone properly, so I have a better chance of convincing him that this goes in our living room.
I have no shot. No shot at all. Well, coin concedes.
I will coin concede first to Jared Pullett for coin conceding to me on Ladder the other day. Thank you so much. Never expected, but always appreciated. This, I think I forgot to mention this last week. Bifrons for your first time legend in the Discord. Congratulations. That's always a really awesome feeling to get and a huge accomplishment. And finally, to our very own director, Wicked Good. Congrats on your promotion.
Well, thank you. Yes. So they continue to pay me so I can continue to buy cards. So that's good.
Wicked.
I'm going to coin concede to Hat because he had gotten a flu, which turned out to not be a flu, but COVID.
No.
Yeah.
No.
So, hope you get better soon, buddy. Try to sleep, which I know is not a common thing for you to do, but that is a good way to help get over being sick. So maybe try to do that a little bit. Please sleep. But yeah, but wishing him all the best, and hopefully he's having lots of good chicken soup to help him recover.
Well, I am gonna coin concede to everyone in US going back home or hosting Thanksgiving. I know it can be nice to reunite with family, but it can also be stressful. And so I wish you all some time to yourself to enjoy whatever it is that you take pleasure in. Maybe that's Hearthstone, maybe it's something else, but make sure that you don't get overwhelmed by spending time with family and still carve out some time for yourself, because I know that can be tough, and holidays can be stressful.
So that's going to do it for us. So until after Thanksgiving, keep calm and be a good window shopper over Black Friday. And if you see us on ladder, coin concede.
Coin concede.
Coin concede.
All life must end. I yield for now. I concede. Well fought. I concede.
You win this one.
The victory is yours.
You have bested me.
I give up.
You win this one, friend. You win this time. I choose death.